Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Rattlecast number 99. Thanks so much for joining me. Our guest today is Tina Parker. She'll be here at the bottom of the hour. But before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do this because we love poetry, and I know you do too, so please do click the like button and share this no matter what you can. Help us spread around the internet, because that really helps. It's poetry spreads spontaneously to some degree, but not as much as other things. So it really does help out if you can click share and subscribe and all that good stuff. And I should say too, there was some confusion last week about the show time, which kind of is moving around. There's really no way around it because sometimes we have guests that can't make the regular time. I'm going to start posting a schedule again, I think, on the Rattlecast webpage. So if you go to rattle.com/Rattlecast, I'll start listing the times again. For a long time, we were being at the same time every week, so it was easier. But then we had some guests out of the country and some guests that couldn't do evenings. And we have more poets coming up. And next week is the 4th of July, Independence Day here in the United States. So we're not going to do a Monday show. It's going to be on Tuesday. So it gets kind of, the summer is a time where I'm working around people's vacations and things. So it's going to be unusual times a little bit. So I will make sure to post the links or the list of the schedule coming up for everybody so that you know when to catch us. But you can also, if you follow us on Facebook, there's always an events page. I make that a week ahead of time so you can check out what time it is. And if you're subscribed on YouTube, you can see the thing when I set it up a week before. So there's a lot of ways to find out what time the show is. I also put it in the morning poem that day at the bottom of the page there. So you'll find it multiple places. But last week, a whole bunch of people made phone calls into us at the time the show usually is for the open lines. And thinking it must have been really confusing because they were watching a taped version thinking it was live, I guess. So sorry for that, everybody. But now let's do Poets Respond Live before we start, before we get to Tina Parker, today's guest. And Michelle Bidding had this poem, Cows Escape Slaughterhouse, Stampede Through California Neighborhood, which is today's Poets Respond poem. And let's call up Michelle right now and see if she can join us. Let's see.
Hello.
Hey, Michelle. How you doing? Let's see. I think you have to click the video button still.
Oh, me? Let's see. Okay.
Here you come. Hello. It's great to see you.
Oh my gosh. Sorry about the lighting with the going through the screen behind. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm great. It was great to see this poem here and have you. We published it a bunch of times, but not, several years, I think. So it was great to see you again. Do you want to just talk a little bit about what this poem was about, what you saw that inspired it and why?
Mm-hmm. Well, so I would imagine a lot of people saw this article come through, especially if you live in California or the Los Angeles area. This happened. These cows escaped. I guess this has happened before. It's in the Pico Rivera area, and I think it probably happens in many places where animals are pent up and caged and on their way to the slaughterhouse. So this was a striking lead line, right? And one thing I do want, and so two things I want to say. When something kind of hits you viscerally, it was amusing to watch, and it was like, yeah, go, right? So it hits on this kind of very deep, visceral, instinctual way, right? Which is really good for writing. Potentially, something can come out of that if things go well and the way that we like them to go. They don't always. So the other thing I want to say about it, Tim, is I'm working on sort of a memoir, nonfiction, historical fiction, cross-genre thing right now, and I was under deadline to get the 20-page annotated outline done and stuff. And this came through, and I've been sitting on my couch for days and days. I do get up and move around, but and look at my birds outside, drive my kids, all that stuff. But I, in my mind, I went, well, I don't have time to write this right now, but gosh, and then I just went, just write, just write a little something down, write the opening line, it starts to come to you. And so that's the message to myself and to my students. Follow that instinct, write it down, because the next day when I did come have a little bit of time, I'm still doing this other project. I said, well, I'm going to put 2 hours aside here and see if I can get something out of it. And it's just a good reminder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take much time. I mean, you have to set aside time, but you can write a great poem in a couple hours, and it really it saves that feeling that you had, and saves the time, and makes something to hold on to from that moment, and those thoughts and ideas, which are what poetry's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. The story reminded me of just every time you drive the I-5, I'm sure you do too. You go by and which my friend of mine used to call Bovine University, and it's just tragic. I mean, just mile after mile of the cows, and every time we do, I feel like I should be a vegetarian, and
Yes.
then I'm not. Unfortunately, I have to confess. But I mean, sometimes I am, and
more we need to be. So,
mm-hmm.
and yeah, Kalinga, that absolutely. In fact, you're just reminding me, the very first poem I ever wrote way back in college, when I was when I was a theater major and in love with Lorca and the poetry and the plays of Federico Garcia Lorca and Dylan Thomas, who's a line of his poetry is on is tattooed on my arm now. But that was the first time I actually pulled over after I'd gotten past the smell, and I jotted down, I've stopped my car to say these things to cows on their way to the slaughter. Oh my
Wow.
God, I remember that. I mean, it wasn't the greatest poem, but it was a moment of, and I wouldn't return to poetry in a really major way for some years. But there was something where, something was sort of, you're channeling, that haunting thing. So yeah, it's interesting. And, you don't have to write the whole poem at the time, but write something. And there's so many people that talk about that, right? Ruth Stone, right? Running through the field and catching the tail of the feather. And because if you don't write it down, you won't remember later. You won't have that same feeling. But if you write even a few lines,
yeah, just a sentence or two, yeah,
you can come back to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you want to go ahead and read this?
Sure.
Okay.
All right. Cows escape slaughterhouse, stampede through California neighborhood. Well, who hasn't dreamt of busting the barn door down, shoving the iron gate wide, dust kicking up faces of whatever beast presumed itself ruler of you, decider with a rope and knife, buzz saw gleaming sharp and round in the eye of its killing hand. It's easy to forget the suffering of others when the meat's so juicy and fresh, which I'm sure wasn't my father's intention when he stuck his fork in our plates without asking, his fist through my bathroom door when, disgusted, I fled the table of family feasting. Blood should beat free and warm through the feet of creatures clacking down streets of their sunnier mornings, something green and granular, still sweet in their cuspaded teeth, a cool drink lapped from faucets along the luscious way. How isn't breath a gift we're born to relish? And at night, where a slow drift of stars drizzles honey for children to doze to, how about the open dream of witchery enough for leaping moons clean over, away from death, just as fast and far as your slender legs can?
Yeah, that was a great poem. That was, once again, Cows Escape Slaughterhouse, Stampede Through California Neighborhood. And I heard, I can't confirm this, but in the comments on Facebook, somebody said that one of the cows was saved.
Yes,
because of this.
No, I think there was a whole coterie. There was a whole band of saviors and speakers and activists that celebrities or whatever that came to the fore and did something. I think I heard that they were all going to get a pardon.
Oh, really?
But I know one in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, it's great something good could come of it, and a great poem too. Thanks so much for joining us, Michelle.
You. Thanks.
Yeah,
Nice
always a pleasure. Bye.
you.
That was Michelle Bidding, and of course, you can find more of Michelle Bidding and her work at her website, which is michellebidding.com right here. Michelle Bidding, and it's Michelle with 2 L's, Bidding with 2 T's.com. So find Michelle there. And now I was going to do something a little different because I was hoping we might get a poem for Stephen Dunn, who passed away on Thursday. He was 82 years old, I believe, had been battling Parkinson's disease for a long time. And maybe later in this week or maybe for next Sunday, we'll get a poem for Stephen Dunn. But about, 2017, I interviewed Stephen for an issue of Rattle, for Rattle number 60. It was a tribute to athlete poets, and Stephen was a really good basketball player when he was young. He played semi-pro and in college, and so it was for that athlete poets issue. And I flew into Pittsburgh and made that trek down in February from Pittsburgh to his house in rural Maryland. It was just an amazing experience. Michael Mark talked about it a little bit too, but it's like a place people pilgrimage to. And, when I flew in the morning. It was like a red eye, or maybe I stayed the night. But when I woke up in the morning, there was snow, and it wasn't supposed to be a snowstorm. It was supposed to be just a dusting. So I switched my car to an SUV at the rental place and drove through these like winding hilly fields in rural Pennsylvania down to his house. And it was just pulling up his long driveway, and then the house opening up there like some kind of poetry heaven. And then him and his wife Barbara were so friendly and just welcoming of people, which they always were. So I have the interview on tape. The whole thing is recorded, of course. Let me transcribe it for Rattle's issues. And at one point, Stephen read one of his poems, Lucky, as the answer to one of my questions. And so I thought it might be nice to play a poem of Stephen, his own poem, Lucky, reading it himself. And let me do that right now. And in this interview, too, there's a little clip of us talking, and then he goes in to read his poem, Lucky. So that will be our little tribute to Stephen Dunn, who just one of my favorite poets. And it's really sad to see him go. But he left so much and so many books, and all of his books are great, so check them out. But here is the interview and the poem.
Even if we say our best thing, our smartest thing, if it doesn't have a formal apparatus to it, nobody's going to pay any attention to it.
What do you mean by formal apparatus? Because most of your poems are free verse. So
I spend a lot of time talking about the formalities of free verse, which are essentially hearing what you put in the air of your poem, following it through, shaping it, writing great sentences, knowing where the arc of the poem is. That's probably the architecture. There's no point unless you're trying to write a great poem. And except your notion of what a great poem is when you're 18 is very different. When you're 40 and when you're 50. I think you should always, certainly there's pleasure for people in writing little doodads and rolling, and even poems that are better than that. But nobody's going to care about it at all. It'll evaporate real quick. I imagine one of the thrills of being an editor is finding that poem that really is, it just does it.
Yeah, that's what makes it worth doing. Yeah. And so you think, so I gather you don't think you can stumble upon that. You can't get lucky and find a great poem unless you really commit yourself to being a poet.
Exactly. I have a poem called Lucky. Right here. It comes from a quote from Albert Camus. Loyal obedience to the rules jointly defined and freely accepted. It was Camus on the true lessons of morality come from sport. It's a good definition of democracy, too. Lucky. Lucky that we didn't know the games we played would teach us about boundaries and integrity. It would have smacked of school, we who longed for recess. And lucky when exiled to right field were not chosen at all. We didn't know the lesson was injustice, just how much that we could tolerate. But always there'd be the boys who never got it, calling foul when foul there wasn't, or marking with an X the spot where the ball didn't hit. Where are they now? What are they doing? Lucky that some of us who loved recess came to love school, found the books that gave us a few words for what the aggrieved already knew. Lucky that within rules freely accepted, we came to recognize a heart can be ferocious, a mind devious and yet fair. I'm not sure that speaks to your question, but luck is what Jack Nicklaus says, you know. He made the great putt because he did 1,000 of them before that.
Yeah, that's true.
And basketball, I shot millions of shots by myself and with others, which is why I was able to score 40 points once.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was Stephen Dunn reading his poem Lucky from the interview. If you notice, you get an idea of how the interviews are edited. It's pretty much word for word what we do, but then we send it to the poet and they can make little changes here and there. And but this section and most of the things that we publish are just word for word transcripts of us sitting down there. And it was so great to talk to Stephen Dunn for those few hours and then have lunch with them. And so many people have had that experience too. So we'll miss Stephen, but some great advice for poets out there. Reminds me of the Randall Jarrell quote that's famous, where a good poet gets struck by lightning, and a great poet stands out in the field day after day and gets struck by lightning twice. Botched that a little bit, but it's something like that. And that's what Stephen Dunn was talking about there. You have to do the work to write a great poem. You have to sit down in front of your desk every day and write and write and write, and then sometimes it really works. So let's go to the open lines now, and we will see. Let's see, who should we call up? I'm trying to find somebody who definitely has a PR poem on the list. Who's mentioned having a poet respond that they'd like to read? So we try to make the first half of the hour poet respond. Yeah, let's call up Richard Westheimer. Richard always has good poems, and he says he's got a poet respond poem for us. Hey, Richard, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Oh, that interview gave me chills.
Yeah, it's a highlight of my life to be able to. I mean, he was one of the first people that I fell in love with poetry for. I wasn't a poetry fan or reader, and I read his and Lee Young Lee and a few other poets like that, and so it was just there was really like some kind of spiritual thing to go to his house, which a lot of people have. I mean, if anybody had a chance to, it was a really wonderful place. It was sort of like an artist colony almost, the amount of stuff that they did there in the town and the amount of people that would go there.
Yeah, and then that poem is, as you pointed out, sort of an Ars Poetica. Ars Poetica of just grinding it out.
Yeah, and that's what you have to do. And that's what he did. I mean, he wrote, constantly for his whole life, really.
Yeah.
So what poem did you want to read? The Poet Respond poem? I'll have two of everything.
Yeah, I'll read the Poets Respond poem. I'll have two of everything. Yeah,
this is a good one. I got to tell you, Richard, you are getting really good where every week there's a good poem from you. Well, this was another good one, too.
I appreciate it. And one of the things I've been thinking about today is that I'm been sort of obsessive about writing for Poets Respond because it's always about something that's way outside me. Mm-hmm. And it's like this real sort of disciplinary challenge to like find something. And this one I worried until 2:00 in the morning, started it way earlier in the week and just couldn't find it. But that activity of just grinding it and working it and believing in the poem is particular for me with Poets Respond, because the material is so alien so often.
And there's a deadline too, which I need deadlines. I can't really write unless I have, which is why I'm using the show. I'm like exploiting all of the audience for making myself write some stuff too, because I wasn't until the show.
Yeah.
So that's what I love about it too. Okay. So what was this poem? What was the story that you're writing about?
Gosh, I have to. Oh, it was about a moray eel.
Oh, that's right.
New York Times had great fun with this headline. When an eel does something, that's a moray, was the headline, which caught a lot of people's attention. But I was just transfixed by this picture of an eel. It turns out eels are the only animals that have two jaws, and they clamp down on something with the first jaw, and then the other one leaps out of their throat and grabs it.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's like something out of Alien, like literally the alien, the mouth and the mouth. I had no idea that was inspired by something real. I pulled up, I found the video. I don't have a New York Times subscription, but I pulled up the video for YouTube. So I'll play it so people can see what we're talking about here. This is it. So he grabs it, and then another mouth comes out and sucks it down its own. Oh, man. There it goes.
And evidently, traditional eel fishers will lay bait up on beaches, and these morays leap out of the water and sort of like do this primordial thing, and you can imagine them like being the first creatures to crawl out of the muck.
Yeah, for sure. Wow.
So, should I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll have two of everything. Yeah.
I'll have two of everything. My buddy tells me I buy too much crap. I've got some sort of pathology, he says. What I don't tell him is, who knows when an apocalypse might come, and the cans of kerosene I have left over from Y2K might come in handy. And if the grid fails and Amazon ends next day delivery and greenbacks are no longer good and folks trade cigarettes and sex for essentials like cat toys and reading glasses, I'll be prepared. Instead, I tell them about eels who have two sets of jaws used to consume what they need. In scarce times, some climb up on land and forage. I say to my buddy, see, this is why I do it. You never know when you might need two of something. I'm like Noah, who heeds a voice intoning 2 by 2 by 2, because the flood will come and the creek will surely rise, which is why I have two identical socket wrench sets. So if the end times marauders lay siege to my workshop, or I lose a set, I'll still have another to fix broken stuff. My buddy tells me that I'm more like Midas, except everything I touch turns into too damn much. I touch a can of beans, it turns into a case. I touch a roll of toilet paper, it turns into 10. I touch anxiety, and it becomes panic. This is the part of the poem where I expect answers, some way out of the mess I've made. But all I've got are beans and a missing socket wrench set and a mythic king who, if transported to my house, and perused my shelves, he'd shake his head at all I'd given up to fill them. He'd leave me alone with my stuff, which is the same as alone.
Yeah, that is such a great last line, too. But then, the combination of humor and seriousness in that poem is really good. And that last line pops out. And now we all know if the coronal mass ejection hits and the apocalypse comes, we know we can all come we're coming to Richard's farm. You got a farm, you're supplied. So we'll see you there.
Okay. See you, Tim.
Appreciate you. Thanks, Richard. Have a good one.
Thanks.
That was Richard Westheimer with I'll have two of everything. Let's see. We have 5 minutes left until we go on to Tina Parker, today's guest. Let's do our haiku in that case. And the haiku that I wrote this week, and of course I always do a little haiku just to sort of remind you, everybody watching, that you don't have to write a poem about, a Poets Respond poem about the big news topic of the day. There's news just flowing out of the world. And there's science news every week. And this week's science story that caught my attention was this right here. I'm going to say goodbye to Richard for a second. It's right here. This is, it's true stress does turn hair gray, and it's reversible. So there's the old axiom that you're driving me you're driving me to gray hair. You tell your kids stuff like that because we feel like stress turns our hair gray. And this study out of Columbia University proved that it's true. What they did is they took hairs. They had this special technique where they could slice slices into the hair 1/20th of a millimeter thick. And each slice then represented an hour of hair growth. And so you could drill back through time in that way, in the same way that scientists do the ice cores for measuring climate change. And so you can go back in time. And then they took journal diaries for the study participants and examined day by day how much stress they had, how much psychological stress. And they found that on stressful days, they grew more gray hair. Not more gray hairs, but the hairs that they were growing were grayer. And one of the study participants went on vacation during the period of the study. And while he was on vacation, his hair stopped turning gray and went back to being pigmented. And they traced this back to some proteins in the mitochondria. And so somehow the psychological stress somehow affects our mitochondria, which has implications for aging and whatnot. But if you think that people are driving to gray hairs, it's true. And that was the Saiku for the week. But it reminded me of how much my hair turns gray this time of year, because here's my Saiku. Where'd I put it? There it is. Dry summer, all the fuel in the foothills going gray. Dry summer, all the fuel in the foothills going gray. And that is our Saiku for this week. And we're going to catch up with Tina Parker in just 1 second. And as always, Tina is a great poet, 2 wonderful books we're going to be going over. If you have any questions for Tina coming up, leave them in the chat windows on both YouTube or Facebook, and I will pass any questions along. And then we'll have open lines later at the end of the show after we talk to Tina for about an hour and talk about her 2 books. So I'm going to take a quick break, and I'll be right back with Tina Parker. And we're back. Thanks, everybody, for waiting while I got connected with Tina Parker. Tina Parker's newest book is Lock Her Up, I should say, which is right here on the screen. And that is new from Accents Publishing. Tina Parker is the author of 3 books of poetry. The poetry collection Mother May I and the poetry chapbook, Another Offering, were published in 2016. Her newest collection, Lock Her Up, is just out from Accents Publishing. Tina has her work has received support from the Kentucky Foundation of Women. Individual poems have been published in Appalachian Heritage, Still, Rattle, Literary Mama, Pen+Brush, and a whole bunch of other places. She grew up in Bristol, VA, but now lives in Berea, Kentucky. And here she is, Tina Parker. Hey, Tina, how you doing today?
I'm so glad to be I'm live with you. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, I've been such a fan of your work for a long time because you are a really unique writer. The way we'll see as we go through your poems, but you have a way of pulling through image and having these really concise, tight poems that are they're very substantial and they're very short and sort of creative and experimental. And it's really cool to have you on the show finally.
Oh, thank you. I've been looking forward to it.
What did you want to start with?
I'm going to start with some poems from Lock Her Up.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So this book, just to say a little bit about it, big picture, it started with me asking questions. Who is sane and who decides? That's kind of the questions that came to mind. And it brought together many obsessions of mine. And I'll say a little bit more about that after I read a couple of poems. So I'm going to start with The Day They Came for Me.
Okay. I'll go ahead whenever you're ready. I have it up on screen now.
Okay. The day they came for me. I sliced open the sun. I walked the tightrope and touched the moon. I drank stars that day. I danced with a tree and climbed into thunder. The day they came for me, I cartwheeled into the sea and sang Open the Snow.
That was The Day They Came for Me, the opening book to lock her, or the opening poem to Lock Her Up. And just that great ending. Those last two lines are just heartbreaking, but in the way that is really emblematic of the way you write, which is that they're very image-based and they're heartbreak or something like that. Do you want to explain about how this book came to be? We have images from the research that you did. How did you come across this? It's sort of a project book. How did you come across this project and how did you start thinking about doing it?
It just came, all of these obsessions of mine came together. So I had come off of writing Mother May I, a project book that I'll read from later. It's also really project based. And then I got interested in everything to do with all aspects of being a woman. I got interested in ghost stories, speculative poetry, witches, folklore. I'd always had this interest in the place I'm from, Appalachia. So basically, it just brought together, I got to look at the notion of women and mental health. And I got to bring together, what were the women's lives like back home in Appalachia during that time. And then it just all came together because it just so happened the asylum near where I grew up is one of the few still open today. And because these things were built in the 1800s as these beautiful buildings, and a lot of them are no more, or they are becoming shopping centers. But then I also realized I could go to the Library of Virginia and access the patient records, which isn't the case in every state. So it was like all of these stars aligned toward this project. And I just dove in and started researching, reading all that I could get my hands on.
At what point did you sort of realize you had a project and it was going to be a book of poems? I mean, it seems like it's something you were fascinated with, but then at some point you think like, hey, this should be a book of poems. When did that happen?
That is a good question. I think about a lot. For a long time, I just let myself read. I was reading all types of nonfiction about the history of mental health, medicine in general in our country, which is really not all that old. I let myself read all kinds. I just soak it all in, and I didn't know for a long time. And then I started also looking at like photographic essays of asylums where photographers would go in to these huge buildings that are now empty and photograph all that was left behind. And so it probably was about a year of following all those rabbit holes. And then I was like, I think I started seeing three women characters. That's kind of how it came to be. I was like, I think these three women's stories will be a thread through the poem in a way that's very mysterious. Like it's not obviously, but I did start thinking about the types, like the daughter committed by her father, the wife committed by her husband, and a widow committed by her son.
And so these those three characters sort of archetypal of the patients that you were reading about, right? They're blended and not based on any one person, but blendings of multiple people.
Definitely, yeah. So they kind of become composites. But I could see these patterns of those, the 3 different ages. And I started thinking a lot about, these transitions in women's lives and how those are perceived. Is it something, are we grieving or are we insane? Those sorts of questions.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it takes me back to in psychology, there's the diathesis stress model where the stress. Speaking of stress in my psych, but people who have a predisposition for mental imbalances, it's the stress of certain times that push them over the threshold in which it becomes unstable psychologically. And I know you're a parent. I'm a parent too. I have 2 kids, and that man, the first year is just of the first child. Man, it's tough to. I mean, the stress is massive, and so that it would push people toward the mental problems that they might not otherwise have is something that makes sense. But then the treatment, there's so little treatment for it at the time.
Yes, and that really was a bridge for me, just because there were also around parenting, there's all these cultural pressures and expectations, and it took a lot of, like trying to keep myself like as a person in the middle of all of these roles that I'm expected to fill. That is when I started thinking really heavily about mental health and the history of that in our country.
Yeah. Do you want to read some more poems?
Yes, thank you. This next one is called Testimony.
Yeah, go ahead. I have it.
Okay, Testimony. They told the judge I sat before an open fire, fell right into it, but wasn't a hair on my head singed. They recalled my vision, a prophetess wearing clothes the color of rotten grasses, grounding sage to a fine powder. They said I put it in their tea, told them to drink and be sanctified. Said their throats burned, claimed they could not speak. The minister said he'd seen many slain in the spirit, but not me. Said I was different, that he felt directed to sign as witness.
Yeah, and then you have next on the page next to it, you have this reprint of the certificate. Do you want to explain a little bit about those details that you've included in the book?
Yes. So it wasn't that long ago that a woman being committed to an asylum was a court proceeding. And of course, like in that time, this is late 1800s, early 1900s, it would be the men of the community. There'd be the men of her family bringing her. There'd be a male judge. There'd be a male or 2 witness, like the minister. So for me, it was just this treasure trove for a poet of, what is the backstory? There's a document that I can see in the archives at the Library of Virginia. And then there's just layers and layers of what is not said, which is what I love about poetry when we get to talking about, what's on the page and what's not. Right.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that now. Actually, that's a good segue. So how do you approach a poem? Like, what are you thinking about in terms of writing a poem when you write a poem? Because your style really jumps off the page as something different from other poets. But what is it you're thinking when you go about writing?
Well, for a lot of time, it doesn't look like I'm writing a poem. That's what it may look like. I'm just reading and reading, and sometimes that's poetry when I want to get like a certain cadence. And sometimes it's like nonfiction, all types of research. And then I just say it's a lot of time sitting and staring. I really require a lot of time to do that. But it's just all of these things just start coming together. And I rarely ever just say, I'm going to sit down and write a poem now. Instead, I'll have these little snippets in a writer's notebook. And I'll glue myself to the chair and painfully go through the writer's notebook and start pulling out tidbits. With this project, a lot, their documents, sometimes it's visual, and I will start to see ways I want to play around and make it some sort of found poem / experimental way that it looks on the page. So I can see that happening. And I like to do, again, leave blank spaces, white space, and and it's fascinating to me how you can like take these really technical documents and do one little thing to them, and it'll either change a meaning or give all these other layers of meaning.
Yeah, and so much of the poem, seems like it comes from those sources. What percentage do you think is just is sort of found poetry that you're weaving into language, in your own language, that you add is like connective tissue? Because a lot of it is, it almost feels like a kind of like archiving as you read this book.
Mm-hmm. I have thought about that a lot because as I think of, what can I archive next and start to list, there's just a part of me that really, I think that's from a young child. I just love to sit and listen to people and catalog things, like catalog what's going on around me. When I was real little, it was a sticker book. But it's hard to know. Like, I think it just a lot of it also has to do with like, I'll start hearing the voice of these women and the way they talk. And then that just all gets woven in together.
Yeah. Do you want to keep reading? I always want to make sure we keep moving through poems too as we talk
Yeah,
too.
sure.
Do you want to read another poem or two?
Okay, sure. Let's see. Did you get to show the page, the way that document looks?
I haven't yet, but so I have the there's the State of Virginia report of commission regarding the sanity. Is that what you were?
Yes, the report of commission. Yes.
Yeah.
This will be a good time to show that.
Yeah, that's this right here. It's on screen now. Oops. And yeah, so this is the State of Virginia. Well, do you want to describe this, what it is and where you found this?
Yeah, this was the court proceeding document I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So it is from the Library of Virginia and just combing through these, individual files. And the other one, I can't remember why that one was blank either, which I thought was, oh, maybe it was just faded.
Yeah. Do you know what year this is from? It says 1900, I think, but.
Yes, it would be early 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
And there was had to be 75 years and older when I went and did my research. And just recently they made it even longer than that. So,
yeah. I mean, that makes sense. You wouldn't want it to be available to the public while someone's still alive, possibly.
Right. Yeah. And that's by state law.
Yeah. So then we have this one that's handwritten text. I'll put that up too. Do you want to describe what this is?
Yeah. So this was almost like this would be the nurses checking in on the patient. Mm-hmm. So it's them giving like, here's the date and here's what's going on with this patient. So it's very one-sided. And this one in particular was about a girl who was very young, just out of school. So this is where they would kind of describe how does she look when she comes in to the asylum? How is she behaving day by day? And that, again, was just so much fodder for poetry.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, one of the questions I had, actually, given the amount of substance you have here, I mean, the amount of content you've looked through, like, how do you carve it into a small book of poetry? It's a very concise book of poems. And how did you sort of decide what to pick from and what not to?
That took a long time. I mean, it probably took let it sit for 6 months or so. And then I actually print out all the pages and lay them out on the floor and start to think about how they're going to fall together. And it just kind of gets to be this feeling of, what needs to fall out and what can go with the stories of roughly these three women. Mm-hmm. And I turned my wheels a long time to figure out, and worked with my editor to get the three sections into admission, treatment, release. And so that frame helped too, to kind of figure out what would stay and what would go.
Well, I said we were going to read poems, so what's the next poem? Yes. I kind of got sidetracked. Before the Time Before Time, is that what you wanted to read?
Yeah, the Before Time.
Or the Before Time, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. The Before Time. Each time I came to, there were more people in the room. They fell to their knees, spoke in tongues, lined out hymns. Granny Bot sang for my female weakness. She said, but still I could not get out of bed. Used to be I'd go with her. I had a quick eye for all manner of roots and kept my wits about me in the woods. Now I ask for catmint to calm my nerves, for coash to ease the cramps. The nurses bring more bromide. They curse and spit the word witch. Then leave the room before I can ask again.
Yeah, and that was the before time
Mm-hmm.
from Lock Her Up. Let's hear another one too.
Right. This one is called Release. The minister says I'm alive through grace, says they may never know what rendered me silent. He tells them to pray. The Spirit gives several messages in other tongues. Praise the Lord, they shout. Praise the Lord. The women place a Bible under my pillow. I dream my voice returns. I point to the minister, but no one listens.
And that was Release from Lock Her Up, the newest book by Tina Parker. Can you just talk a little bit about like what you learned, maybe that you didn't know before doing this research, like broad things, like how long were people staying in these places, and things like that. Like what was the common, like the regular experience? I worked as a counselor, a mental health counselor, and one of the clients we had was one of the last people in the United States who'd had a lobotomy. Mm-hmm. And so she was sort of in and out of homes because of that. And just we had some of just the most heartbreaking nights, because I worked a lot of overnight shifts and she'd be up late and we'd just be talking all night. And of how she felt like she left herself behind there, like when I think it was in the early 70s maybe where that happened. She was one of the last people to have that done. But so what did you learn, like in the big picture of things about this practice that thankfully is over? But
I think that I learned, like I started to see the trauma, the evidence of that in how the women came in and how they were cataloged basically. So, like there would be, we're admitting this young woman and she has a jaw on this side of her, a bruise on this jaw. So there would be all of this backstory that we wouldn't have, firsthand from this woman. But that's one thing that I saw. The other was that there could be pay patients, at least at this asylum near where I grew up. So, like a father has his daughter there as a pay patient. And then part of like cataloging her ends up writing about him. So it's like, she's here as a pay patient and her father owns considerable property, it's like, that's interesting. I'm not sure how that's tied to her own, well-being and mental health. Then the other part was in that same case and in others, there would be letters from the superintendent back home. And you could tell that in many cases, like a woman had been sent back home and then the family is writing to ask if she can come back. So there's like the superintendent letter saying, well, we are surprised that she had not shown any, signs of unease for so many months. So a lot of times, there would be shorter stays, like of 6 months, and then the woman would go home and then maybe come back. So those are some of the things I was seeing that I wouldn't have known or thought about.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear, because it's similar. When I was working in that field, we sort of had transition housing where I was, where people were trying to, get their lives back intact, and then they'd go home to their families where all the triggering trauma was. Right. Like abusive spouses or abusive parents or siblings, and just the memories or the drugs, and they, it was just hard to keep up anything. The recovery that we made, the progress we made would always like revert at Christmas time, it was just heartbreaking to see, that happen. And, but at least, everybody was trying, and it felt like, it feels like back then it was more trying to get things out of sight.
Yes, it did feel like that. And just to think of all of those supports that wouldn't be in place, like how jarring that would be to be passed back and forth.
Yeah, I think there was one last poem you wanted to read from the book. Do you want to read, or from this book? Do you want to read that one?
Yes, it's called Arrival.
Okay.
Arrival. God save me. God could not. Safe here, away from him, or nearer. A door, another door after door, and I open. I open my bags. They've emptied me. They've taken her. God, be with me. Let me keep the baby. I've not had time to finish her blanket. The final door opens.
Yeah, and that's Arrival. And that line, God be with me, let me keep the baby, just such a powerful line at the end of that book here. And once again, this is Lock Her Up, which is available from Accents Publishing. And because I just saw somebody ask, you can find the book at tina-parker.org. So that's the best place to go probably, because I assume the author has the best link up that they'd prefer. So go to Tina's website to find out where to get a copy of that book. So let's take a pause and we're going to talk about Mother May I, your first book. But let's sort of back up and talk a little bit about how you came to poetry and how long have you been a poet and what sort of guided you through your life as a writer?
I've been really serious about poetry for a little over 20 years now. And it started, as a child. Like I had my first diary when I was 8 years old that I bought with my own money. It has the little lock and key. And it started by just writing things down in there that I thought I shouldn't say. I even censored myself. So I have the diary and cuss words about my brother are scratched out in the mud. So that's what it was. I found my voice there on those pages. And I always loved listening to people talk. So my, family getting together, listen to them telling stories. And I was just that, the child who people a lot of times wouldn't notice because I was just observing and taking everything in and not saying very little out loud. But I grew to love poetry around some teenage angst. That's kind of how that's where it became poetry. And just stuck with it from there. And I think I was saying some about I love revising. I like making things really concise. And I love the backstory. Like I say, I grew up hearing stories, but a lot of times the whole story was not told, or there were things that we weren't supposed to say or talk about. And so I love that about poetry because that's what I like to do is have a lot of it off the page, a lot of tension between what is said and what's not said.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it because it's, that there, you have really short lines and a lot of white space, and then the tension is in between and in that white space around the things that you do write. What poets do you like to read? Do you like to read poems in the same style? Or do you branch out to different people? Do you have any recommendations for a reading list or anything like that you especially, as you progress through as a writer?
Yeah, I have Rachel Zucker. I read her books. I would read over and over and copy out line after line as I was working on Mother May I. I love experimental poetry, which she definitely has the really long, kind of breathless feeling lines. And I love Anne Sexton. Obviously, I read that many times as I was working on Lock Her Up. And Marie Howe, Nicole Brown. Oh my, it's hard to think when you ask that directly, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. So if anybody has any questions for Tina, please ask them in the comments. I'm looking at Facebook and YouTube, so ask any questions there, and I will pass them along. Now, your first book, or your first full-length book, I should say, is Mother May I. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what inspired that book? Because it's a similar, very tightly woven thematic book. So how did that book come to be?
Yeah, that is true. I mean, they really are both kind of linked story poems that kind of all together tell one story. This book came about from parenting and just feeling all of this, like I was saying earlier, all of the expectations, oh, you're not supposed to say no. You should instead say, never use this word. I mean, there were just all of these how-tos, what I should and shouldn't do. And then all of that colliding with like making sure I maintain who I am as a person, aside from being a mother, which I don't even know if that's possible, as I say. And then I went into these like these exercises where I would just write down everything that I said, mothering over the course of a week or day. I would record dreams that I had and that the really small children were telling me about. And then I would record things they said. So it kind of came from that. And I think another part was kind of thinking about my own mother, my grandmother. So like that line of women and how those stories, you know, what their lives were like and what they did and did not tell me. A lot of what they did not tell me coming to play as well.
Well, let's hear some poems from this book too. What did you want to read first?
This one, the first one is called Stop. So this is again like cataloging what I would say and making myself face like all the things I swore I wouldn't say or do as a parent. Stop. No, we're not playing baby anymore. Get up. You can walk. Use big girl words. Sit down or you're not getting dessert. You have a napkin right there. Why are you wiping your mouth with your sleeve? Why are you doing that? Please let me eat. I need my arm. You're hanging on it. Stop kicking her. You're not going to bite your sister. We don't hit. I don't know why I plan things for you to do with your friends when you act like this. If you want to hear the song, stop talking. Leave her alone. Just close your mouth and be quiet. I'll tell you when to come out. I'm not ready to see you. We're going to turn that off in a minute. You have 5 more minutes. No, there are no more minutes. It's time to go. Come on, I'm leaving. Just a minute. Get your hands off me. I don't like the hitting hands. Use your words. No, I can't. You know how to put them on yourself. It makes my back hurt. Because I'm mean.
Yeah, it's hard not to chuckle a little bit reading those.
I know, I gotta get the mom look going.
I've said so many of those things, myself all the time. So talk a little bit about the expectations that sort of the culture puts on mothers, because it's very different for fathers. It's one of those things that's very sexist still. But my experience as a father is like, hey, you're doing something with your kids, high five. And then
shout out on Facebook.
Like just if you go, I take my kids like grocery shopping when they're little and like, oh my God, what a great father. And that's the only like feedback from society I get is like, wow, you're participating, gold star, Yes. And for mothers, it's the exact opposite. It couldn't be farther from the truth. So, so can you talk a little bit about that and about that experience of becoming a mother? And when did you, maybe like, at what point did you realize there was something like wrong with that,
Pretty early on in the process, I realized something was wrong. But I do think of it too as like, there's so many choices now for women, right? So it's like am I going to make this choice? Am I going to work some in the home only? Am I going to work a little bit of both? Am I going to have a full time? There's just so many options. It just seems like whatever, I choose, it's going to be majorly damaging. There's just always this feeling of a shoe about to drop. And, if you do it this way, you're going to damage the child for life. And I don't know. It's just such an extreme parenting culture,
Yeah, do you think, it seems like it must not have always been like that. Like it must have be something new. It doesn't seem like I can't imagine my grandmother worrying about that, the stories that you hear from your parents being raised or even my mother. I don't think the pressure, that I know of was there. She's never talked about it anyway. My mom's probably watching right now or will watch tomorrow. Maybe she can tell me tomorrow if I'm wrong, but it feels like there wasn't this kind of pressure put on mothers. And When do you think that started and why? I mean, is it a social media type phenomenon, like the putting your whole life in public, or is it like is that a way to sell subscriptions to magazines? Or, I mean, like, where does it come from, you know?
I know, I did read a little, and the history of like even cleaning products, are not even that old in our country. It kind of became this thing we're going to market to women, and then they need to do all these things in the home. But I just don't even know. It became a very, if you don't do it this way, or if your kid doesn't have this many activities, or you make them their homemade whatever to eat this way, it's a real problem. Yeah, I don't know.
I wonder, just thinking about it, I wonder if it does, since you mentioned advertising, I wonder if it, the different ways that the different genders are marketed toward, and, and like guilt is sort of a powerful marketing tool, guilt and shame maybe. Whereas for men, there's an obvious one, which the advertisers exploit instead. Maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know, but it just, I don't know. It seems like a difficult time to be a parent, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to read another poem?
Yes, I will. Let me get my little, I gotta switch my piece of paper. Okay, so I would read Raising Jesus. Raising Jesus. Did you pin his arms and hold him down, Mary? Did you smack his legs? Did he ever make you cry, Mary? Did you take a deep breath, count to 10, Mary? I bet you just held it in, didn't you, Mary? Did you hear him say, Mama, again, and cringe and sigh? Were you relieved when it was a temple day, Mary? Did you dream those dreams, Mary, where you see him hurt or worse? Did you wake in prayer, Mary? Did you ask God to let you die first?
Another powerfully concise poem, Raising Jesus, from Mother May I. And let's see, we have what was this question? So Lacey Snap, this is going back to the last book, but let's just do that. Lock Her Up has a few poems which have the same title, but the content evolves throughout the book. Can you speak to that writing process and why you made that choice? Possibly some insight into how the poems changed for you and for your speakers from the beginning to the end of the book.
Oh, Lacey, thank you. That is a fabulous question. So one thing I'm just going to say, it's really kind of a trend in poetry collections. Like I'll just go and I'll look at the table of contents. So part of what I was doing was like, well, that seems to be a thing. Let's have this same title show up several times in the table of contents. But I think one thing I was doing with it, with something like please for admission versus please for release, and then that'll be, a few titles like that, is that was the one-sided thing. Was I only saw why a family member would want a woman admitted to an asylum. Like that's what would be in the documents. So that like left me to consider the other side. Like what if she could plead her case to be released? What would she say? So some of those titles linking through came like that. A similar one was in the Have What I Left Behind. And then it's called What I Became. There's kind of like a series, but there was a catalog of the woman's belongings. So like I could see, this listed, like she brought in a bar of soap, her apron. So that left me to imagine like what she left behind. So that's where some of the like title threads would come from.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what was your experience publishing that book? I guess since we're going back, we weren't planning on going back to Lock Her Up, but what has been your experience getting these poems published? Because they are so thematic, and sort of they're books that really hold together as books. But it's hard to imagine them like standing out, like being published individually. And then how many like drafts did you go through putting the book together? Like what was your publishing experience for these two books? Was it similar between the two?
It was similar in that I did a push, I kind of do it in different seasons. So I take one season and do a lot of submitting individual poems. And I really looked at, like with Lock Her Up, you were so right. Like I needed really several of them to be published together. And it can be really difficult, to get a single journal to do that. But I had a couple of places I can think of that took a batch of the poems so that they kind of stayed together. So I had that whole, with both of them, with Mother May I too, I had a few journals take, like a handful of poems. And then it's just, all I say about it is it's just being stubborn with publishing, stubborn as a mule and never giving up, like send stuff out and don't take it personally. So I think with Mother May I submitted the manuscript probably for a year. And I do have a really ugly, horrible spreadsheet that just scrolls on and on of like where things got submitted.
There were two questions from Gwendolyn Taylor Soper, who said she bought the book and included a link for everybody else to buy one too. So thanks for that, Gwendolyn.
Thank you. Yeah, there's an Accents Publishing link.
Yes, there's two questions, and maybe we'll do. They're sort of separate, so we'll do them separately. So she says, Tina, do people in your Appalachian neighborhoods talk openly about mental health issues? Well, maybe they're connected. And a follow up: how does it feel to be writing about important, sensitive topics? So. Are people talking about that? I mean, I don't know. It seems like younger generations, in my perspective, talk about it much more than when I was younger and I was working in clinical psychology. It was like a hidden thing, but now maybe more so, at least for young people. But what is it like in your area, and how does it feel to be writing about such an important but sensitive topic?
Oh, thank you. I like these. Yeah, even when I was growing up in Bristol, Virginia. I mean, I guess that's a generation or two ago. It was not talked about, and it would have been kind of looked down on because, we don't want to like ask for help in that way. There was kind of like this feeling of you take care of it yourself. And even though at the same time, like it was a threat to, if you get out of line, we're going to send you up on the hill. That's where the asylum is. That was the only way it was talked about. And I think it's very different. So now, totally different story. And it is like, people talk about where I live in Appalachia. People are very open about, I have counseling for this and such, or here are these resources. So yeah, that is something that has changed. I think,
just as a side thing, do you know like the economics of mental health? I mean, in my experience, it seems difficult to find like even a therapist and then pay for it. Do you, I mean, I don't know if you have any, in the current state of it, but do you know anything about that? Because it was sort of, in our little program that I worked at, the state government paid for that housing, but it was a specific program. And when that ran out, there's only a certain number of beds that they would do that for. And then it was only people who could afford the place that, that could take advantage of the help.
Yeah, I think that's right. And so like our two big insurance carriers here, they definitely will have mental health providers. But again, that's not going to be something for people who have, hourly, our like frontline workers, for example. It just would depend, I think.
And then the other question from Gwendolyn was about how it feels to be writing about such a sensitive topic.
Yeah, people ask me that. I think I just dove into it. I didn't think of it as being, a sensitive, timely topic. I just thought more of, I'm just going to follow what is interesting to me right now. But I also am a big believer in, like, we are always a product of what's going on in the climate around us. Like, I feel like that's probably what was driving some of my interest in some way. So I'm not going to sit out and be like, I'm a political poet, but again, I can't be removed from all of that that's around me. So I think in that way, what really is interesting to me is feminism. And so it's always going to be timely in that sense. It's hard to answer that one. We could go on and on.
Well, do you want to go back to some poems? We have... Okay. From Mother May I, we were going to be reading some more from.
Yeah, the next one is, it has a long title that's also the first line. I'm just beginning to swear off restaurants with indoor playgrounds. I'm just beginning to swear off restaurants with indoor playgrounds when a woman turns in her booth. She says, "We lost a son. He battled cancer 12 years. They just kept finding it. But you do the best you can. Day by day, you enjoy them."
And that was I'm just beginning to swear off restaurants with indoor playgrounds. Another poem from Mother May I. One thing I was wondering reading both these books is how much you feel like, I hate asking poets like these kind of questions usually, but it feels like your poems are so journalistic that it feels like that event really happened. Do you feel like it's creative nonfiction poetry in a way, or do you feel free to? I mean, I know in Lock Her Up you made composites of people, which wouldn't be fair in journalism, but
Right.
but it's still the truth of the things you were reading. Do you feel like it? Do you have like a do you feel like you can change details without any problem, or do you feel like you should stick to the truth?
Oh, I feel like I change things, but I think I definitely have a journalist in me, and that drives a lot of what I do. So, and that was, early, many years ago, I worked for a small town newspaper, which really fed that like need to go observe and catalog, and yeah, I think it. But again, I don't have any trouble making things up because that's kind of what becomes freeing to me from like the true facts, but I'm always fascinated as to what those really are.
Yeah, I always feel like there's just a difference between like truth and facts,
Mm-hmm,
and there's something
mm-hmm.
that's truer than facts, and it's
Yeah,
like
there you go.
it's true across like a fact can be taken out of context and twisted
Mm-hmm.
and have a different lens and misinterpreted, and the truth is a fact that can't be done, and it works across time and space kind of, and is broader than that. I feel like poets are drawn toward truth and have real trouble being journalists.
Mm-hmm.
So I know
Yeah.
some, journalist poets have gotten in trouble over the years doing that kind of thing because you can't help it, and you're seeking the truth though. So it's weird to, that whole fact versus opinion thing that they do in like fifth grade or whatever doesn't really hold up all the time, and
No.
poets are cutting into it. Um,
Yeah, and I think that's you really hit on like someone growing up where there were, taboo things that girls shouldn't talk about or say. Like that's what I'm always doing in my poetry. Like, have I said my truth yet? Have I said it what I need to say? And I'm constantly pushing. So it is kind of it's something about truth for me. Like, have I said it all?
Yeah, do you think that's like the poet's mission? Like, would you think that's like central to what you're driven to do as a writer, as a poet?
I think it is, yeah, definitely for me, is kind of pushing at what my truth is. Hmm.
Well,
And just showing up, like, aside from that.
yeah.
Sometimes it's receiving and very mysterious, but yeah.
Well, talk about that receiving and mysterious aspect of it, because that's the thing that I just always find so fascinating. It's what makes me like never get bored with poetry.
Hmm.
Is that there's something mysterious about it that is always surprising when you engage with it. How do you think about that? Is there any like way to make that magic happen, or what do you think's going on?
Yeah, I think I just have to, and this, it doesn't necessarily seem like I'm going to sit down and now receive a poem as a whole, but I'm just going to let myself follow what is interesting to me in a moment or what I'm obsessing about. And I think we can tend to sabotage ourselves sometimes as artists and be like, oh, I'm not supposed to do that, or I need to be doing this other thing. Or what if I said that? I'm going to hurt someone's feelings. But that's kind of what I do is like, I just have to let myself follow it, and eventually it is going to turn into the next project.
Hmm.
That's where some of the mystery is, and seeing it, all of the threads come together. That's the moment I love in a project when it's like the threads are starting to come together, and I don't even know how to explain it otherwise, but it just feels like I'm in this, zone, and it's starting to fall into place. That's the only way I can talk about that mystery. I don't know.
So let's talk a little bit about your writing process as far as like the individual like line breaks and putting things on the page, and in the revision process too. Is there any sort of like advice you have or way you go about doing that? Like, what do you think of in terms of how the poem's going to appear, and how long do you play with it before you like see the poem as it's going to be?
Those are great questions. So a lot of times it's something I hear in my ear. So there's a music to it, and I'm, constantly hearing that in my mind as I'm working on it and revising it. And I guess I would say just let yourself hear that music. And the other thing would be just be playful. So I will take, like, I'll have a poem and it looks one way on the page, and I'll just copy it down. I'm not in Word right off the bat, but eventually I'm in Word, and then I'll just copy it down and start messing with it and seeing, well, what happens if I make this white space here, or bump these lines down, or start just reversing everything. A lot of play, and not feeling really personal. Like, I feel like that's like has gotten easier the more I write. Like, it doesn't feel like, so we can't touch it, it's sacred,
Yeah. Yeah. So how many like drafts do these go through? Like, do you find like if you submit a poem and say it's like passed on in a magazine or whatever, if like several times, do you feel like there's something wrong with the poem and you work on it, or do you feel like you're done already and you just wait for the right journal to publish it in?
The second one, yeah. I usually, once I have a batch going around, I usually don't touch them anymore, and then more so, I'll, like, if I'm doing a project, I'll look for gaps and write into those gaps. That's kind of where it's a lot less mystery sometimes, because it's like, oh, I don't have a poem about this aspect of this female character, so I will try to make that happen. That's not my favorite thing to do, but I can. But yeah, I don't really mess with them after they're out into the world. I know some people do. That always fascinates me.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that it's too, I'm trying to find a picture because we didn't have the cover of Mother May, but you have great covers of both of these books. Let me pull up a picture of the other cover. But this is Mother May I, which is a very interesting image. I don't know what it's an image of. Here, I'll put it on screen.
Yeah.
But this is the cover of Mother May I. But it's very evocative, though. Like the blur. I mean, it's definitely space, but then there's some blurred thing. Is that maybe a? Oh my gosh! I just realized what it is.
I know. I was trying to give you a minute. I was like,
yeah. So it's an ultrasound. So I've had that book. Yeah. That book's been on my shelf somewhere, even though I couldn't dig it up, and I didn't realize what it was. So that's a picture of an ultrasound. Over the universe. But then this is a really interesting painting too. It's a painting of a woman with sort of rocks, and her head is one of the rocks on her shoulder, sort of weighing her down. So they're two very different but very interesting sort of metaphoric covers. So how did you go about? Like, what was the cover process like? Because they're both very interesting, and it really affects the way that you look at the book to see the cover. So how did that process work?
Yeah, for Mother May I, it was very like to the last minute. On one of the editors, Seth Pennington, had this vision, and he was like, "Send me an ultrasound photo." I don't know if that's what you call them, but yeah, the little and overlay with the constellations. What do you think about that? So it kind of just came up like with him experimenting and playing with that and knowing the book, which was kind of a cool thing in itself. Lock Her Up was like this visual artist and I were both featured in Pen+Brush, and I saw her work, and it was one of those things where then I started going to her website, and I was like, I know that's the cover of the book, because I had all the poems ready. So her name's Sherry Weichler, and we just collaborated from there. So they were really two very different cover processes.
Yeah, and that's Sherry is SHARIWESCHLER if you want to look for more of Sherry's work, because I just love this cover. So Jackie McManus has a question here. We have time for maybe one more poem and a little bit more talk. Jackie McManus says, has writing your poetry changed you, and how?
Oh, I love that. I think more if I don't write, it changes me for the worse, right? So I think my writing has made me like tell my truth and constantly be digging at it in a way that has changed me because, lately I'm thinking, I can carry that over into my relationships, into other aspects of my life to just constantly be, have I said what I need to say? In that way, it definitely has. Yeah, I kind of went from being the child, the young adult, even in my 20s who never spoke up to being someone who does.
Oh, that's really interesting to hear. That it's poetry that's done that for you. I don't think I've ever heard anybody mention that before. Do you want to close out with one last poem? I'm trying to find the poem you wanted to read last, but
yes. So for last, I put the one that was in Rattle.
Ah, okay.
It has a long title as well. My 4-year-old asks what happens when people die, and when I hesitate, she answers her own question. First, they wake up on the day they're going to die, and they pack up all their clothes, and they say goodbye to their mama and goodbye to their daddy. They go to a different state and find a nice empty house that's quiet and a good soft bed, and they lay down.
Yeah, and that was just one of those poems that's just such a tight nugget of truth, like we were talking about before, and an insight. Can I ask if your 4-year-old really said that, or something approaching that?
She often, that's what, it was hard not to stop when I read that long title, often answered her own questions. And still I'm not quite like quick enough, like I'm an introvert at heart. So you can ask me something that might take me a while to answer it. I've tried to be on my toes a little more this evening, but yeah, so that was pretty much her. I'm sure I messed with it some and played with the lines, but yes, that was her saying that at its heart.
So now that these 2 books are finished, what do you have like right now going on? Do you have any other obsessions you're working on or projects? Because you seem to be like I mean, maybe I'm projecting, but you seem to be from these 2 books like a project kind of poet where you have some kind of thing that you're into, and that's what drives your writing. Do you have a project that's going on right now?
Yes, I do. So I'm going to look at all these Appalachian religion survey records, and I'm looking back into the way that people around the 1930s were cataloging churches in Appalachia. So I'm fascinated. I'm like, they get to go and write down all these little details and the backstory that's there. So that I'm looking into, and always I call them my kind of creepy minister religion type poems are a part of that as well. And I let myself take in a lot of true crime because I know that that's all going to come together somehow in this new project.
That's really interesting. What did you learn by looking at those surveys? Like what is surprising from that archival information?
What was fascinating to me is they catalog, again, this is what I'm always like, the ministers or like their lay preachers, they all get their own page. There's a lot of focus on like this preacher does not have any education. So, you can kind of see where the person cataloging it is coming from. And then the other fascinating part is there like the whole sections that are like dog-eared and turned down. And so these are the women who are working in the churches. But it says do not tabulate. So basically, right, they're not getting counted. So that's one little thing that's fascinating to me. And always, like, I think about, at the heart of this is the church is just a huge like role in these communities in this time and really still today in a lot of places in Appalachia.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing, what you come up with and how you put all that together, because that sounds fascinating. Tina, thanks so much for joining us and being a guest today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to have been with y'all. And like we talked about truth, I always say keep writing and keep telling your truth, right?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Tina.
Yeah, thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
So that was Tina Parker with her latest book. Her latest book is here on the screen one more time. It's Lock Her Up. This is from Accents Publishing here. You can see Accents Publishing. That's ACCENTS Publishing. You can also find Tina, the best place to go is her website, Tina, Tina-Parker, PARKER.org, O-R-G. So find Tina's poetry there. Her 2 books are just wonderful, 2 books about things, and you learn a lot reading these 2 books. So please do pick them up like Gwendolyn did. Thanks so much for that. We're going to be moving to our open lines in just a moment. And before we do that, let me put these numbers on the screen. What did I do? There. So these are the numbers. This is how you participate in the open lines. We already have a few people lined up. Gordon Coppola, Nivedita. Richard can come back if he wants. He has a prompt poem. Gordon Coppola, I already mentioned. Carlos Schwartz. Julian Matthews is here. Vicky Miko, Joyce Stahl. So we have a bunch of people. Angela Gartner, too. We have a bunch of people lined up who would like to share poems based on the prompt, or news poems, or anything else you would like to share. Zachary Honeycutt just sent me a little wave, and that's how you do it. So if you would like to share a poem, if you'd like to be on video, do it through Skype for sure. That's send me a chat message at Rattle Poetry, all one word. That's Rattle Poetry, just like it sounds. Just wave, and I'll wave back and acknowledge you like I'm doing for Zachary right now. And then I'll call you when it's your turn. I'll make sure to get new first-time callers for sure. And then if you'd like to call over a phone, though, it's 818-850-7727. That's 818-850-7727. Pick one or the other. But if you call by phone, let it ring a few times and hang up. And you can email the poem to openmic@rattle.com so I can show it on the screen as you read. Now I'm going to take a really quick break, and I'll put this up for you. Next week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be episode number 100. And this is Allison Luderman, poet in the Bay Area. Her newest book is In the Time of Great Fire. She sent a bunch of books that we're going to be going through and looking at. And do note the special date. That is the regular time now, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. But because of the Independence Day holiday being on the regular Sunday, we're going to be doing it on Tuesday, July 6th. I assume people are going to be doing their barbecues and things and not going to be live for a Rattlecast. So we moved it up. That's what I'm going to be doing too. So we moved it up to July 6th. And that will be Rattlecast number 100 with Allison Luderman. The prompt poem this week for the open lines coming up was to write a poem about a fairy tale. So that'll be the prompts we'll be hearing in just a moment. But give me a second to get all that set up. I'm going to stand and stretch. You can refresh your drinks, and I will be right back in a moment. And I'm back. Thanks so much for giving me that brief moment to get this all set up for the open lines. And now, as I mentioned, as we were going out of the break, the prompt for this week was to write a poem based on a folktale or fairy tale. And my poem that I picked, I looked up, so try to find a fairy tale I'd never read before. That was my goal. And I found these, which probably everybody listening is familiar with, but Asbjornsen and Moe are sort of like the Grimm brothers of Norway. And they had this, I just love this title, The Giant Who Had No Heart Inside His Body. I don't know how common that story is, but it was something I pulled up looking for old fairy tales that I'd never heard of before. And Asbjornsen and Moe were chronicling these back in the 19th century, just like the Grimm's brothers, as sort of a national pride kind of project that was going on those days, where people were trying to, thankfully, chronicle and save the stories of their time. And the story of the giant who had no heart inside his body is sort of a kind of typical story where a prince is trying to save a princess, and this giant is too big to kill, obviously, but it turns out he has to hide his heart all over the place. And so the prince finds it eventually in a egg inside a duck, inside a well, inside a church somewhere. But that's after they sort of tear apart their house trying to find where this giant's heart was. But what was striking about the fairy tale for me was how indifferent the princess seemed. When the prince shows up to try to kill the giant and save her, and she's just like, oh well, if you're gonna kill the giant anyway, I might as well help. And then the giant seems kind of really not that bad. I mean, she's not like in a cage or anything like in those fairy tales. He's just kind of there, and he goes out to work every day, and every time she asks him a question, he just answers. And so it made me think of that giant, and this was my prop poem based on this fairy tale. The giant who had no heart inside his body didn't know where to hide it. It was a big heart, after all, as big as a Cadillac, as loud as a kick drum. And where do you hide such a thing? He tried the barn, wrapped in layers of aluminum foil and linen, hung on a hook from the highest beam, but still the field mice found it. He woke that night to the tickle of their tiny feet inside the huge hollow of his chest. His own laughter chased him through the darkness until he lifted the barn roof and scared them off. Next he tried the bottom of the lake, sunk with stones to the deepest part. The surface rippled softly with every beat of the mighty heart, but the sound was muffled and the fish well fed. For a while it worked, until the cellophane began to leak, and the hole inside him filled with water, a well overflowing, and he wept for days. When the hungry princess arrived, it was raining. He noticed her bright umbrella. Eat, he said, having no other choice, his voice rolling down from the clouds. And so she ate, slice by slice, bite by painful bite for a year, until no one any more might find it. And that was my retelling of the giant who had no heart inside his body, an old Norwegian folk tale. And I was pretty happy with that poem. But then, as always, I read Megan's. She's always doing it better than me. So that is life. This is Megan's retelling of Red Riding Hood. And here this one goes. Red. In another dimension's version, the huntsman never comes to pry open the wolf's stomach like a reluctant, belching mouth. He wasn't passing by. He was home skinning a fresh kill, or kissing his wife, or sleeping when he shouldn't have been, dreaming of swift, darting things. The wolf is satisfied, and nobody minds, because a wolf is all fang and appetite. The girl wishes things were different, but where she is, that's a toothless desire. It floats away like a cape in the wind. Grandmother is sleeping under the sky of the wolf's belly, starless and pulsing. Over and over, nothing happens. Again and again, nobody comes. So that was Megan's retelling of Red, the Little Red Riding Hood. And now let's see what you have for us. As I usually do, I'm going to call a veteran caller for the first time, but then I'll move on to a first-time caller. I just want to let you know that it's like the old-time radio show where there's a delay. So I'm actually in the future, like 30 seconds ahead of wherever you're listening to this, at least. If you have a slower internet connection, it was buffering and stuff, it might be even more than that. So you have to turn off your stream when I call you. Just listen through the phone or through Skype. At least hit mute. It's best if you just click out and come back later, because otherwise there's two Tims you're talking to, and it's confusing, and there's that delay, and then I hear myself too, and it's just all gets confused. So make sure you mute yourself, or mute the stream at least, or X out of it when you call in. So let us see. Let's call up Angela Gartner. She was the first person to ask on, and she has a Jack story for us. So let's call up Angela.
Hi, Tim.
Hey, Angela. How you doing tonight?
Turn you off. Hold on.
Okay.
All right. How are you doing tonight? Good?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I just love my new Sunday routine because I don't have to wake up early. Then I have my softball league, and then I come and do this, which is just really fun. And so I'm just loving, like the kids asked me what's my favorite day of the week, and I said Sunday because it totally is. How's your Sunday going?
Good. We had a baseball game this morning, so I'm glad I can join today. But happy belated Father's Day, too. Last week was kind of harder, but this week, definitely. I like the new time, too. Sunday nights are a little better.
Yeah, I think so, too. It's a nice way to start the week, I guess, or finish your weekend. Either way you look at it. It's kind of one of those buffer ranges. So what did you do for the prompt? It was Jack's story. Do you want to say anything about it?
Yeah, Jack's story is really about... Me and my son would always, go through the Jack and the Beanstalk, and I would retell it a new way every time. And he's like, I want the Jack story. I want the Jack story. And it's always been our thing. And I wouldn't retell it the same way. We would always do it in different,
that's cool.
Different kind of things. But it's the one thing that put him to sleep. Like whether we were out of town or at home, it was like the one story that helped him go to sleep. And so it's kind of, but I always had some issues with it as well, because it does have it's kind of an odd story if you really think about it. And Jack does things that you probably wouldn't want your kids to do.
Yeah, that's true. If you see a beanstalk, don't climb all the way up it, kids.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want my child to climb it or talk to strangers or, some of the things that Jack did. So that's what kind of the poem is about is me kind of talking about some things. But it was still the best thing ever for him to fall asleep. So
it's cool that you told it and retold it different ways too, because that's the way fairy tales or folk tales are supposed to work. That was the history of them. I would like to say the name of the podcast. I was listening to some podcast, and but they were saying that like the ways that the words we use are based on oh God, I'm drawing a blank. There's certain words for storytelling, like telling a yarn is an example, where it was a yarn is, people would be doing menial tasks throughout the day, and that was just a way they entertained themselves while they were yarning, and so that's why a tale is called a yarn. And so many other words like that just come from that day-to-day labor of just entertaining yourself by telling a story. So it's so cool that you were doing the same thing and not just reading a book, and telling it differently every time.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's what story, and I think, it's something that attracted him to this story because I had the book. It's like the gingerbread man. You could tell that in all different ways too. So, but Jack and the Beanstalk, like once I started telling it, and then he would also sometimes tell me a Jack story himself. So like we would kind of trade off, but mine always worked like to put him to sleep though. So.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, let's hear this. This is a
story.
Well, let's hear this. This is a Jack story.
Jack story. Why would Jack talk to the bearded stranger when going on his mother's errand? I also never understood why he climbed the beanstalk instead of picking and canning the miles of green pods. This was my son's nighttime ritual, his mom telling the Jack story. In my town, Jack meets a turtle, bunny, or wolf on the road after scaling the leafy greens past the birds and tallest trees. They warned him of the dangers of the woods and house on the hill, but he would sneak in the giant's kitchen to steal money or pancakes or play a street hockey game against the big ugly friends. Most nights I would dream of stealing the golden goose and mounds of gold coins. A hand the size of a building would seize me around my waist and throw my body into the clouds. What's the moral of this story? Jack, a thief. He murdered a man, leaving the giant's wife, a poor widow. She didn't recover her husband's remains after he fell to his doom. For years, this boyhood adventure brought the Sandman to my son's bed. He would sprinkle the dust on his eyelids. They would get heavy, and soon he was snoring. Then I didn't care how Jack behaved, because I could happily sleep far, far away.
Oh, that was wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing that, Angela.
Thank you, Tim. Have a great night.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
It's Angela Gartner with Jack's Story. A really good poem and good conversation. Thanks for joining us, Angela. Next up, we're going to go down to... Let's go to... oh, wait, I said the new first-time caller we'll do next. This is Zachary Honeycutt. That sounds familiar. Have we had Zachary on yet? Maybe he's not a first-time caller. Maybe he's the first time with Skype. Hey, Zachary, can you hear me? I'm not getting any sound or video, but the call says it's answered. Okay, we'll have to try it again. Maybe, Zachary, message me a phone number, maybe. I also don't see any poems here from Zachary. So email me a poem and maybe include your phone number in there or call in through the phone, and I'll try to get you later. Let's see. Oh, wait, I just see that. We have the fairy tale poem. Okay. So I'll try to call you later. We'll try again. Text me, message me over Skype, your phone number. I will try it that way. Or we'll try it again over Skype, but we weren't getting any audio or sound. Let's see, I'll actually... We'll try it that way. Okay, so let's go on and we'll try to swing back to Zachary in a little bit. Let's call up Gordon Coppola.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Gordon, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. How about yourself?
I'm doing excellent. It's a good night of poetry so far. What do you have for us today?
Well, I got a little sonnet called Pinocchio Did Nothing Wrong.
Excellent. And why did you pick Pinocchio? It's such a great... we love the the Disney cartoon because it's so dark. I don't know if I like my kids watching it with us, but I like watching it the most, I think.
Well, certainly the Disney cartoons were a big part of growing up, even when I was a kid. I mean, they were a really special thing back then because they came along in theaters like on a 7 or 8 year cycle. And so if you missed Pinocchio when it came out, so I saw it whenever it came out in its cycle. And then my parents, I think, we didn't have VCRs back then, of course. But yeah, they were always very special. And Pinocchio itself, that particular movie, won the Academy Award. And it still stands up as just a brilliant piece of cinema, of art.
Yeah, for sure. It really was. I just think it's the most like poetic or artful of the Disney movies. It's
Sure.
One of those that's like, we talk about the truth and the mystery and stuff. Like it's hard to articulate, Pinocchio. Whereas other movies, you can kind of like know what they're getting at and what the themes and morals are. But Pinocchio is just it's like a poem more than any other of those movies, I think, having watched every single one over and over and over again with my kids at this point. Okay, so let's hear this. Pinocchio did nothing wrong in a sonnet, which we always love, of course. Let's hear it, Gordon.
The corpse of Ukulele Ike, my friend Cliff Edwards, vaudeville and movie star, and Jiminy Cricket's voice, went unclaimed and was donated to the UCLA Medical School. 2 actors' charities and the Disney folks got him buried right. Cliff wished upon at least 1 million stars, including losing ponies at the track and 3 alimony-enriched ex-wives. Those strings the blue fairy magicked away kept growing back to tangle him. Booze, drugs, and a kind fool's destiny with cash. Cliff, there's a gig opening up at Pleasure Island Cabaret. The boys think you'd be perfect.
Oh, wow. Well, thanks for sharing that. Pinocchio did nothing wrong. Great poem. Thanks, Gordon.
Thank you, Tim. You have a good night.
Yep, you too. Of course, Gordon Coppola with Pinocchio did nothing wrong. Okay, yeah, we have a phone number for Zach, so let's call that up. We'll get Zachary Honeycutt on the line.
On at least Tim.
Hey, Zachary, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going, man?
I'm doing good. Glad we could connect. I don't know what was wrong with Skype, but it just wasn't working.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on either. I tried to use Skype for the first time, and I guess I didn't do it right.
Yeah, no problem. A lot of times what it is, just for everybody watching too, is that if you have another application that you do, like Zoom or something, or one of the other video or Google Meet, sometimes that will still be like controlling your camera, which is kind of creepy. But if another program is using your camera, the Skype can't access your camera or microphone. So that is sometimes the problem if the video and stuff doesn't appear. But anyway, what I think this is a fairy tale poem you had for us, right?
I got 2 poems for you today. I've got The Fox Feet, which is the fairy tale poem, and I also have a poem that I just got published in Warp 10 a couple weeks ago.
Ah, very cool. Congratulations on that. What is Warp 10? Tell me a little bit about that, because I'm not familiar with that publication.
Yeah, they actually have advertisements in new pages. That's how I found them.
Ah, cool.
And they're really, really cool. They're devoted to anything sci-fi related or Star Trek related. And they also publish a lot of sci-fi poems and short stories. And when you go on there, you kind of feel like you're riding on the U.S. Enterprise, because the home page itself has all of like these decorative stars all around it. So it's really, really cool, the ambiance and everything. And so I sent them this sonnet that I had wrote about aliens, and the editor really loved it, so he published it.
Is this the House Beside the Road?
Yeah, The House Beside the
Very
Road.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have this up. I went to the website, and so everybody could see it. Yeah, that is very cool. It's like, and I love, I'm a science nerd kind of guy. I love science fiction, and so, and I think there's not enough science fiction and fantasy type publications for poetry. It seems to me, and there are a few like Strange Horizons and things like that publish poems. But it's really cool to see a new one that I hadn't heard of before. So thanks for sharing this. Why don't you start with that since I have it up? The House Beside the Road. Is there anything you want to say to introduce it first?
I wrote it a few years ago. I think it was one of my 3 a.m. ideas. I get poem ideas at 3 a.m. sometimes when I can't sleep, and I'll just write a poem, and then I'll fall back asleep. And that's really, I think, all I have to say about it.
Okay, cool. Well, let's hear it. I'll put it up for everybody at home.
Yeah, I'm waiting to see it.
Oh, you're gonna have to read it yourself, because that delay,
Okay.
you won't be at the same spot in the poem as this video is. So
That's cool. I got it. All right, here we go. Sonnet 9, The House Beside the Road. I saw a small house beside a stone road that stretched forth before a shriveling sky, revealing to me some knowledge of old. Secrets that slumbered now showered the sky. They moved under heaven before my eye, over and under and next to the stars, throbbing and bobbing the trampoline sky, up close and not shy, unlike far Kesars. Inside of them, what personality, alerting me they're here like headlights of cars, glowing to wake the sleepy galaxy, shimmying for the moon, fading like scars. And who was with me to witness these things? The house one whisper of birds without wings.
Oh, that was really cool. Thanks for sharing that, Zachary. The House Beside the Road, Sonnet 9.
Yeah.
And that was, again, in Warp 10 Lit. And 10 is the numerical 10. So it's WARP 10, 10, LIT.wordpress.com. So that'd be cool. I have to check that out and explore around some of the stuff they're publishing there. That seems fun.
I really like them. They're cool.
So what was the other one? The other one was the prompt one?
The Fox Feet.
Yeah, do you want to go ahead and read that too?
Yeah, can I just say a little something about it before I read it?
Yeah, definitely. I was going to ask, what was it inspired by?
So this one is one of my favorite poems. It's actually one of the oldest poems that I've ever written. I wrote it when I was 15 in my freshman year of high school. And I had this aunt. We're Sicilian. I have a big Sicilian family. and her name was Providencia, but everyone called her Fa for some reason. And she used to tell fairy tales, and when I was a little kid, she used to tell me this story about this creature called the fox feet, and he was almost like a man, but he had silver-haired feet, and it was almost like a Hansel and Gretel-esque type kind of creature. Like, he wasn't really a nice creature, and almost every tale that she had, he'd basically be luring these children back into the forest to his shack, where he'd cook them in the oven and he'd eat them.
Oh, wow.
And so I got inspired when I was 15, and it kind of like, it was almost like aliens just beamed it into my head. I saw the first stanza in my mind, and I couldn't stop writing it, and I wrote it from start to finish that day, and then I came home and I read it to my dad. So I love reading this. I've read it a lot, like at poetry readings and stuff, and it's kind of just like a fun, rhymey kind of poem.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. The fox feet. That's a great, and I'd never heard of that before. That's a great, urban legend or fairy tale or whatever you want to call it. Let's hear it. Go ahead whenever you're ready. I'll put it up.
Yeah, I will. All right. The Fox Feet, Part 1. The Creature in the Thicket. Barren and dry in a desolate place, there lives a creature with a snarling face. Its yellow eyes shine like the sun as they glide down from where they hung. It spies a man it will attack. Its feet are large, their bottoms black. They shovel up the cold, hard ground and set the night on edge with sound. Before the target sees in its stare, it leaps forth on feet full of silver hair and uses its feet to make the kill with enthusiasm and for the thrill. It lives in that shack on that desolate place. Its human features complement its face. Is it a creature or is it a man? Does it kill for the thrill just because it can? This is the legend of the Fox Feet, a tale I'll fare once and ne'er dare to repeat. This tale starts out in a little village. The men go plunder while the women pillage. You see, this town is very poor. It smells like cabbage in the local store. And it smells like garbage and rotting grime when the village idiot commits a crime. And because the idiot smells like garbage too, the whole jail reeks like a rotting stew. And because rotting stew is what they eat, the people are hungry and they crave meat. So the men must go out and hunt in the wood, where strange occurrences are misunderstood. Strange sounds and scents and spirits fly, surmount that tree, surround the eye. The same stories are always too bittersweet. The men allured by its scent do become the meat. The men are tasty, what a treat. Soft and pasty, unspoiled meat. See him drool with hunger for a meal, because human flesh has some great appeal. The men realize too late that they must go. The fox feet growls, his hunger grows, yet he is imprisoned in the forest land. So some lucky some slip by the fox feet's hand. Well aware that they just avoided death, the men talk aloud with icy breath. You see, it's always something in this strange town, some sin forgotten, perhaps some one passed down, that led this thing to go astray, to terrorize tomorrow and today, to punish those who do not pray, to have their sins all washed away. So for a time they refrained from the forest path, wondering what incurred the fox feet's wrath. Now there was a local blacksmith by the name of Jack, who worked so hard that he broke his back. And because he broke his back, the whole town said he would. His son Jack worked and did what he could to help his father melt the oil and hammer the steel, if all the rumors were really real. It was said that he read very well, that he did not want to leave, the town gossip could tell. And yet, though he had to give up school and go to work, the thought of no homework made young Jack smirk. One day, while Jack was at the blacksmith's shop, the local drunk Charles came by for a stop. He accused Jack of stealing his cattle. Their voices jousted in verbal battle. I didn't take your pig, but you can't take a drink. Then old drunk Charles began to think, well, if you do not get my pig back, it'll be the end of you and your father Jack. I'll report you to the OBC. I bet you made that name up, probably. Old drunk Charles staggered outside, panting and collapsed on his hide. Suddenly the cold wind began to stir, and Charles probably wished that he had some fur. The wind kissed him with its icy chill. All soon became quiet, soon all was still. An eerie silence fell upon the air, whose voice gave Charles a jarring scare. When he refused, stammered, and shook his head, in a whisper the voice replied and said, if you want your pig back, follow my voice. You need that sow, you have no choice. So he followed the voice across the plain, his blood full of rum and without a brain. Farther from the town he came, upon that wood to which none dare lay claim. Then Charles stared at a deep thicket across the plain, all foreboding thoughts drowned in his brain. He barged into the thicket without looking back. Suddenly the old drunk had a heart attack. A flash of silver feet was all he saw, that pierced his neck and lowered his jaw, so that he was carved by silver-haired feet, whose toes were good for slicing meat. And after he was portable, the fox feet took his snack to his shack to eat. He threw his kill into his oven in his little shack. The old drunk Charles would never come back. Charles was gone, but no one noticed yet. Word would spread of the silver-haired threat.
Oh, that was great. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, that was cool. I mean, that could be like a one of those adult children books that, except instead of funny, dark, that Melissa Balmain had a couple episodes back. It also reminds me that we should do some kind of Halloween show. And I was looking at the date. Actually, Sunday's a Halloween, so I don't think I'm going to do a show on Sunday. But maybe that Saturday night that week we'll do the show and just move the day there. And then we'll do a cool Halloween ghost story show and try to find a poet who has good ghost story poems. But thanks so much for sharing that, the fox feet.
Yeah, I got plenty of stuff that I could do on that show. And awesome. I just to let you know, by the way, I sent that out to you, the fox feet and some other poems in the general submission. So if you're interested, take a look.
Okay, cool. Well, we definitely do. We read it all. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, take care. Have a good night. Yes, that was Zachary Honeycutt with two poems, the fox feet and what was the other one called? It was The House Beside the Road. So two poems there. Let's see. David Williams is sending me a message. I'll call David up next. Let's go to Nivedita Karthik next, though. And then we'll do Carla Schwartz for sure. We'll do Jillian Matthews. We'll do Joyce Stahl. And then we'll go to David Williams for sure. I just waved back. Yeah, for sure. So let's go to, though, Nivedita Karthik.
Hello.
Good morning, Nivedita. How are you doing today?
Hey, Tim. I'm doing great, thank you. How about you?
I'm doing great. So how are you liking the new apartment? You happy there?
It's the same. It's not much of a shift. It's just 4 floors up from where we're living.
Well, up is a little better, though. A better view or something, right?
A better view, yes. Indeed. I agree with that.
So you sent two poems, a prompt and a pose response poem. Which one do you want to share first?
Anything that you say, both are up and ready for me here. So,
well, let's do the poet response since we've had a bunch of fairy tales the last couple poems. What was this one that you wrote about? Chef ridiculed after promoting bread.
Basically, there was this chef in the UK who sort of wanted to eat a vegetarian steak, and he didn't want the fruit cauliflower that everybody apparently says tastes like steak. I don't know because I don't eat meat, but apparently cauliflower is supposed to taste like meat and is a good substitute for it. But then what this guy did was he just took sourdough bread, roasted it on the pan, and added Parmesan cheese on top and called it a steak. And people were like, that's just posh cheese on toast. Like, what's wrong with you?
Oh, wow. That's so funny.
But the picture does look good.
we're seeing a picture there, and it does look like something you might make, for your kids or something on the last day, when you need to go grocery shopping.
Nice evening snack or something of that sort that sort of fills them up.
Yeah, that's funny. I wonder how much it costs for a breadsteak. I wonder if the price is on here. I don't see it, but that's funny.
Sadly, it isn't, because he was still sort of, I think, in the process of bringing it onto the menu at his restaurant or something like that. But even before that, he put it up on social media and it just created a storm. So that got me thinking about people's tastes and what somebody likes, somebody may not like. I mean, nothing against cheese on toast, but then to be calling it a steak is kind of weird.
Yeah,
so I just went on from that, and I have a very, very small point this time for first respond, and it's just about my taste.
Okay, well, go ahead whenever you're ready. I got it here.
Thank you. My taste. Caviar, saffron, truffles, and vanilla beans. Ugh, my palate is not so refined. Just give me my simple pulses and greens, else I'll be sitting for a long time on my behind.
Thanks so much for sharing that, DVD. That's a funny story and a funny little poem. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Could always use a laugh. And what is the other one? The fairy tale poem.
So I didn't choose to do a retelling of a fairy tale. Instead, I was sort of like, well, every story has something that we can either learn from it or unlearn from it, as the case may be. Like, we should take some things and not take some things. So I was going by that, and I sort of took 3 stories: Snow White, Beauty and the Beast, and Cinderella, all very well known, very common stories, and sort of went on from there to talk about how we are, what we should be like, and what we shouldn't be like, sort of like that. So the sort of lessons you can learn from fairy tales rather than a retelling of a classic tale, because once I started the retelling, it just seemed to go on and on like a novel, and I was like, okay, no, this ain't happening for a poem here.
Okay, well, that sounds interesting. Let's hear this. This is lesson learned from fairy tales.
Lessons to learn from fairy tales. How we are. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all? We are all light and dark on the inside, and inside each of us resides a bit of snow and Maleficent all tied up. Who we portray is based on our mental makeup. How we react. A red rose too will wilt and fall, petal by petal, each one creating a minor squall, deep inside the heart and mind where anger and hate remain entwined. What we should aim to be. She finds happiness in the tiniest of things and knows that sorrow and joy are the up and down of life's swing. The lesson to learn from Cinderella is this, you see. Everyone has a special glass shoe, but yours will fit only you. So wear it with dignity and you will be set free.
Excellent. Thanks so much for sharing that, Nivedita. Lessons to learn from fairy tales. A pleasure as always. Always love talking to you and sharing these poems and stories. Thank you, Nivedita. Have a good rest of your Monday.
Thank you. Lovely talking to you. Have a great Sunday.
Bye.
Bye.
It was Nivedita Karthik with 2 poems from the prompt and from Poets Respond. Okay, let's see. David Williams is a first-time caller. Let's call up David. I'll make sure I have him on mute in case he's got the blare going. He's got 2 poems for us. Let me pull up a Word doc to make sure we don't dox him. Well, David's not picking up either. We'll swing back to David in just a little bit. David sent 2 sonnets. Let's see. I have a sonnet new to this and didn't know it doesn't have to be a prompt. But he's got a recent poem. I'll go out on a limb that minions are a fairy tale. Yeah, I think so. So we'll get to that in just a little bit, and then another one. Messaging with the grandkids. So we'll try, I'll read one if we can't connect, but I'll try to connect David. Since Skype wasn't working again, you can text me or email me your phone number and I could just call you up, or you can call in at the phone number. Of course, the number is 818-850-7727, but I'll try you on Skype again and see if you answer. And if not, I'll just read these poems too, so we get to them. But it's always nice to talk to people. So let's see. So next up, let's do Joyce Stahl instead.
Oh.
Hey, Joy, how you doing?
All right.
What do you
Enjoying the show.
What do you have for us tonight?
Well, I have a poem based on a story that I had seen 2 days in a row because the vagaries of Facebook showing me the same thing about the LA County telling people to stop feeding the feral peacocks in the neighborhood in an attempt to get rid of them, or because there are too many, or a lot of factors going in there. And so I kind of...
Yeah, I saw that story too, and it made me want to go find some feral peacocks to feed, actually. I remember thinking, like, that would be something we could do with the kids. Go hunt for some feral peacocks to feed, but I guess maybe that's not a good idea.
Well, and I really went down a research rabbit hole because I started looking at bird watching blogs and found some really interesting facts about feral peacocks and the fact that California is not the only place that they exist, but they're really kind of interesting creatures, but they're not going anywhere. Like, you can stop feeding them and they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, so. That's true. Okay, well, let's hear the poem. I have it ready.
Okay. Don't feed the peafowl. The most conceited of the birds, he struts his stuff too cool for words, fans his plumage and rattles it. He takes to Twitter in all caps. His wingman has deserted him for a peahen not worth notice. The neighborhood shows no delight at hosting the peafowl mixer. Peahens pretend disinterest in the nightly karaoke. March through August they're pairing up, though these aren't Easter eggs they lay. Peacocks are not migratory. Strutting settlers are here to stay. Don't feed them. They're omnivorous. You'll have to move out of LA.
Excellent. I love that, Joy. Thanks so much for sharing that. And, a lot of rhyming and fun poems that rhyme, which are interesting. I don't know if you saw the episode with Melissa Balmain from Light, but people should be sending her poems because these are fun.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Joy. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so that was Joy Stahl, of course, from Elkhart, Kansas. And let's try again. David, see if we can get a connection this time. Because David called me back. David Williams, this was. But I couldn't answer because I was talking to Joy. Yeah, still no answer. So the ringer must be off or something, or the answer button. Okay, so we'll see if we can just get him on the regular phone. Instead, let's go to Carla Schwartz. So let's go. Julian Matthews was next. Sorry, I'm trying to go in order. And we have Vicky Miko, too. I almost forgot Vicky. Might have to call Vicky on the phone as well, because her internet connection isn't the best. Okay. Well, okay. So Julian didn't answer either. I don't know if there's a problem with Skype tonight or just people without the ringers on, but let's call up now David Williams over the phone instead. Hey, David, I hear myself in the background, so cut off your stream. So I have you on mute for a second while I hear that. Are you there? Oh, I still hear myself. Can you mute that in the background? Wherever you're watching this on, just turn that off or X out of that screen or something so that... That's better. Yeah, thanks. So thanks so much for joining me. This is David Williams. You're live on the air. Who am I, or where are you calling from?
Lincoln, Nebraska.
Excellent. Well, I'm so glad you could join us. And you said you have two sonnets for us. Do you want to explain?
Yes.
Happy to have you read them both. The first one I had here was Buggers. Do you want to explain a little bit about that poem?
Yes. Well, first, I mainly write sonnets, but these are from a series of sonnets that I'm writing called Sonnets for Kids. And I didn't really have one about a fairy tale. I didn't know there was a prompt, but I saw this one and thought, well, the Minions, that's a fairy tale. So that's where this one's coming from.
Yeah, that sounds good. And just for everybody and for you too, you don't have to do the prompt. The prompt is just something to encourage people to write poems. And really, the prompt, honestly, is for me. So I have something to write because I like doing prompt poems. But that's the point. So you can share whatever you'd like. And let's go hear this Buggers poem first.
Okay. And this is more just something to have fun with. Most of my sonnets are highly serious, but just have fun with this one. Buggers. Those little guys with funny eyes are minions. Really, I don't know if they are guys. They have some hilarious opinions and tactics that don't work so well for spies. They gambled all to get to New York City, and everyone chased them away, showing them no tolerance or pity, though all they really wanted was to play. And then they made friends with their nemesis, a monster who'd have rather seen them dead, but they helped her out of her senses and won by getting down inside her head. These bug-eyed little bots with many digits chirped all awake like little yellow crickets.
Oh, that was great. Well done, sonnet. Buggers. That was David Williams. David, what is it about sonnets that makes you want to write sonnets? Just let me ask.
Well, I have had a lifelong passion for sonnets, starting way back in the 70s when I started memorizing them just because I loved them. I later taught them in high school for over 30 years, and now that I'm retired, I'm finally getting around to trying my hand at writing them.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's great to hear. The other one was Messaging with the Grandkids. Is there anything you want to say about this before you read it?
I will just say that it is self-explanatory. This was something that actually happened, and this was my message to Riley.
Okay, cool.
Well, and it was recorded just much as I'm reading it here.
Oh, wow. Well, let's hear it. I have it ready, too.
Okay. Messaging with the Grandkid. I talked with Riley earlier today. He showed me how to use the message app and just record the things you want to say. As needed, you can even belch or clap. This has some advantage over text. I mean, who really wants to spell a belch or alphabet a clap? And what comes next phonetically when T-Rex starts to squelch some grandpa's silly efforts crammed with letters? These kids, I tell you, what comes out their mouths is often even better than their betters, though sometimes less than lovely when in crowds. When Riley learns to type, he'll be a wonder. Batman beware if Riley gets your number. P.S. Riley, record me something new. I'll put them both on Facebook if you do.
Oh, those are wonderful. Well done, Sonnets. Thanks so much for sharing both of those. Messaging with the Grandkid and the Buggers. Thanks so much, David.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope you call in again and share some more anytime.
Yeah, this has been fun.
Yeah, good night.
Night.
Okay, before we have, let me put David Williams in our phone book so that I know who it is next time. Okay. And then we have another first-time caller. Gwendolyn Soper, who we had some great questions on for Tina earlier in the show. And it's another first-time caller, so let's call up Gwendolyn. I hear myself in the background, so mute if you haven't yet. Okay, that sounds good.
Yep, I've muted. Yeah, okay.
Excellent, thanks. Well, you're live on the air, Gwendolyn. Thanks so much for sharing something. And thanks for those good questions earlier in the show.
You're welcome. That was an incredible conversation that you had with Tina Parker. Holy cow.
Yeah, well, these are just so fun. I love doing these. It's episode 100, obviously, and they're always fun. So, and always interesting. And every poet is different. It's you never run out of stuff to hear and talk about.
Yeah.
So what did you want to share tonight?
Well, actually, I'm sharing something about the opera, The Magic Flute, because it's based on a fairy tale written by a German fellow named Emanuel Schikaneder, who wrote the libretto for the opera. And, it's really interesting that today is the day that you had this poetry prompt, because here, Tina Parker and you were talking about your experiences in the world of mental health and helping people and mental health awareness. And here is this person in the opera, The Queen of the Night, or the opera, The Magic Flute, and her character's name is Queen of the Night, and she's basically like the most unhinged, mentally unbalanced person you could find in, I think, any fairy tale. She's just got like multiple personality disorders like narcissism, anger management problems, super arrogant. She's super envious of Sarastro's fame because he's like the king of light, and here she's the queen of the night. And I mean, she's so evil, she can't bear to see her daughter, Princess Pamina, held in Sarastro's power, so she hands her a dagger to go kill this king. Anyway, so
yeah, the story's all coming back. I did see. I think this is the last thing. It was on. I don't know if it was off Broadway, but it was in New York City. I saw a performance of this maybe 4 years ago or so, and I think it's the last time I saw anything in a theater. But it was great. It was. I didn't know anything about the story going in, so it was one of those I was learning as I went. But it was a spectacle for sure. It was really interesting. Opera.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if for children it might be a good introduction to opera, because there's that man who goes around the forest playing a flute and tinkling like bells and all that stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, it definitely would be good. It's interesting. But let's hear this Queen of the Night poem.
Queen of the Night. And I've written it in 2 acts because the opera is also in 2 acts. Queen of the Night, Act 1. I was her, the desperate woman on stage, singing the Mommy Dearest of the coloratura flock. Hell's bells, her voice is a dagger, piercing high notes like the sharp weapon she forces Pamina in tears to take. Sarastro sees it coming. Light no surprise wins in the end, but not before Tamino's flute changed sorrow into joy, and audiences were charmed with Papageno's bells. Act 2. I really wish Mozart could see the opera now. Sitting in the balcony, he'd be thinking, wait, I was so bored when I wrote it. I never thought they'd take it seriously.
Oh, that was excellent. Thanks so much for sharing. That was Gwendolyn Soper with The Queen of the Night. Thanks so much for sharing that and calling in, Gwendolyn.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I actually sang in that opera, and I sang the role of Queen of the Night. So.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on the show.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Tim.
Yeah, that was Gwendolyn Soper. And Gwendolyn has a website here, which she included at the bottom, which anybody is welcome to do. She also included the Queen of the Night. Oh, wow, look at that. That's the aria in which she sings. See, maybe we'll put that in the show notes or something, because one of the things that you can't really do on a live broadcast like this is show music or play music, because then the copyright, I'll get a copyright notice or whatever afterward, a flag, or I don't know what they call it. And sometimes Facebook doesn't show, we'll pull a video because of the music too. So it doesn't really work all the time if it's something that might trigger that. But you can find Gwendolyn Soper at Gwendolyn Soper. Let me put that on the screen. GwendolynSoper.com. That's GwendolynSoper.wordpress.com. And we'll put this Queen of the Night. I'm going to watch it after the show. But we'll put Gwendolyn singing Queen of the Night in this YouTube video. We'll put that in the show notes, but you can find it. I'm not going to read out the long YouTube URL, but we'll put it in the notes. Okay, so We got about 10 minutes left before I have to get going. Let's call up Carla Schwartz. Who else do we have? Richard could come back if we have time. And and let me put before we do that though, I just have to make sure I add the contacts so I know who is calling in the future. That's always helpful. Just for myself, and you guys have to sit here while I do it. Okay. And Julian Matthews too. So we'll this is what we'll do. We will hit Carla Schwartz. Oh, and Vicky Miko. Boy, we got a lot of callers. Okay, so we haven't had Vicky on in a while. And Vicky sent a whole bunch of stuff. But I'm going to do Vicky's phone instead of Skype to make sure it works. That's what we'll do. So I guess Vicky did not get that. I'm just every time well, maybe I'll try Vicky. Well, no, because Vicky was mentioning her on the stream and the chat window. I saw that her stream was buffering, which means the phone call is not going to work. So I will try. We'll try to get back to Vicky in a second. But first, let's do instead Carla Schwartz, like I said. And Jason Brunner's here, and you're watching because you just sent this. So Jason, call me if you want to. Hey, Carla, how you doing?
I am good. I am good. Thank you so much. It's a wonderful night of listening.
Yeah, it's been a great show. I like the prompt and what everyone's come up with, and just all the segments have been great so far. What do you have to share with us?
Okay, so I saw the prompt and I said, okay, well, I went to this. I found this fairy tale called Frau Hulla, or Mother Hulla, and the gist of it is that there are two sisters. One's a do-gooder who's does a lot of work, and she gets sent off and eventually comes back and she's showered in gold. And then there's this other sister that's lazy, does nothing, and gets sent off, or she gets, she thinks she'll get the same treatment and come back showered in gold, but it turns out that she gets showered in pitch, in tar,
Mm-hmm.
That's the basic story. So I have this poem, which is kind of a different take on it. And it's called Father Hulla.
Excellent. I'll put it up and go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay. I work for our father. It's called elder care, wiping his bottom, showering his body. Listen, I'm not crazy. Germs cause cancer. Our father's riddled with cancer inside and out. Not everyone does the same kind of job. I clean the dust, wash his clothes separately from mine, of course. The other day, I hired 2 men and a truck to haul, that's H-A-U-L, sorry, all his furniture away and the books. So when he dies, I can just step away. Of course, I care about the environment. I care about the cows and the ducks. I worry I'll be homeless when he dies. So I wrap his legs. Don't let him breathe fresh air. There's a world of germs outside. If he steps out there, he may fall. He may shit his pants. Today I roll up the rug. He may shit on that too. Don't tell me how to help him. I own helping him. No one can do the job I do. I know it. 2 people can't do this job. If I hire a live-in aide, they will steal everything. Slavery is not legal in this country, you know. I take what I am due. I'm the sister covered in gold, not you. It's clear to me you feel deprived because you don't have to stop swimming to change a diaper. Don't respond. Just talk to him. You find him a new memory pill. They only want your phone number. Listen, I'm not crazy. I'm very stressed, and I know you can't help your muddied self.
Carla Schwartz, thanks so much for sharing that powerful poem. I am the sister covered in gold. What a line that is. That was Father Hole or Father Hull. Thanks so much for sharing that, Carla. Holla. Father Holla. Thanks so much for sharing that, Carla. That was great.
Oh, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yep, bye. Okay, so while Carla was on the line, we had a phone call from a 405 number, and I'm wondering if that might have been one of the people we've been missing. We have Jason Brunner, who just sent a poem a little bit ago. Let's see if that is who it was. It could be Vicky, too, from a different line. We'll see.
Hey, this is Jason.
Hey, this is Tim from Rattle. You are live on the air. Thanks so much for calling. Jason Brunner, I assume, right?
Yeah, Jason Bruner.
Bruner, yeah, thanks so much for calling. I'm glad you could get connected and share a poem with us.
Yeah.
So what do you have that you'd like to share today?
This is a poem I wrote. It's actually, I was in an airport, just kind of wanted something to do, and this kind of popped into my mind. And then when I saw it, this week is fairy tales, I thought this matched pretty well.
Well, that's perfect. Great to hear. And I forgot to ask, where are you calling from?
I am visiting my parents in West Mansfield, Ohio, but I'm from Oklahoma City.
Very cool. Well, I'm so glad you could join us. Let's hear this poem, Our After. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Yeah. All right. Our After. We spoke in thimblefuls, produced miniature bouquets of sentiments that littered the pebbleway to the cookie-cut cottage we created. Our child was malnourished, almond brittle-boned, and all we could conjure was a lizard-tongued brew that turned her candy green. Come first flake fall, she died, and you tipped over the hat rack on your way out the rainbow pane door, and I scooped up our words and burned them.
Oh, wow. Another powerful fairy tale, Our After. Thanks, Jason, for sharing that.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was Jason Bruner. Let me put Jason in the contact. I love the images in that. Very powerful images. Jason Bruner. Our After was the poem. And let me call up quickly Vicky Miko and try this again. Well, I'll try the Skype too. If I can find that. There it is. Just the phone drops a lot when you try Skype. Nope, that's not working either. Maybe I'll try this way. Nope, that's not working either. Okay, well, I think I'm going to have to... I'll read a poem. Vicky sent a bunch, and so, Vicky, hopefully we can connect on a future episode to read some of the other ones you sent. I'll keep them in my inbox here. But let's do the prompt, the fairy tale for today, since it's Fairy Tale Day. And as always, Vicky included some artwork, too. And I will just read this one for you to close out the show. So this is a poem based on a fairy tale from Vicky Miko. And here this goes. Poem based on a fairy tale. There's an epigram. Come on then, roared the queen, and Alice joined the procession, wondering very much what would happen next. From Lewis Carroll, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, Chapter 8. Chapter 4, plus 4, and a little more. Croquet in the Garden, or how Alice was crowned queen of the queendom. Release the beasts, bellows the queen. Release the beasts and start the match. a row of shackled pink-feathered squawkers, and a corralled pile of hedgehogs helter-skelter across the lawn. The match commenced precisely 4 minutes after tea. Petty Noah noticed the Queen's studded camise, is that how you said it? She was stained to her skin with raspberry tart. It attracted her hungriest of bumbles, who stung and partook to her honeyed decolletage. Oh, the screeching bellows spit over the palace courtyard and down every portal. Whack 'em dead, pluck out their wings, stab 'em in the jelly, off with their heads. Just then the Queen vaulted in the clumsiest of gallops across the checkered walk. Tripping over a hedgehog, the Queen fell headfirst into the thorny rose bushes. And oh, no one was prepared for what happened next. Oh, it was most unfortunate that the cards mistook the Queen's bloody head in a rose and consequently lopped it off. Chapter 4+4.5. Seated on the chamber sideboard, the Sphinx, the bong head, and the cards, all puddle-faced, Alice stroked the quilly hedgehog curled on her lap. All heads turned to the head of the table, where the headless Queen was madly, wildly flailing her arms above her head that wasn't there. Just then, a flock of flamingos swooped up her headless body and fling it into the marble cistern. Everyone in sight cheeky cheered the end of the match. The beheaded Queen is no more, the town baller pontificated so loud it out-pontificated even the Queen's pontifications. The beheaded Queen is no more. Chapter 4+4, and a smidgen past the chapter before. The hedgehogs rolled Alice to the head of the table. The bumbles flew in the rest of the tarts, and deposited them in appropriate succession. When everyone had finished all their tarts, to Alice's most surprising surprise, the longitarsi inchingly dropped the Queen's crown on top of Alice's head. One that was clearly attached. Chapter 4+4, shut the door. On particularly ravenous days, off the palace porticos, the Queen's head is often seen rolling across the garden fescue, screeching, "Off with her head! Off with her head!" The end of one particular tale. And here we have a photograph, or a painting collage type thing that Vicky included. Just a wonderful artwork with flamingos and Alice there as the new Queen of Hearts. So thanks so much for sharing that, Vicky. And thanks, as always, for sticking me with words that I don't even know how to pronounce. I'm going to have to go to the dictionary after the show for that. But it's always a pleasure sharing your stuff, Vicky. And we'll do other poems next week's and in future weeks. And hopefully we can connect over the phone. So I have a whole bunch of poems, too, in the open lines. Coffers here, which what I'm going to do is read them when we have time. I don't want to go past the time it is now pretty much. But on days where you don't have as many open line callers, I will play and read some of this other stuff that people have sent me in our open lines inbox. And I'll let you know if I read your poem this week. That's how I'm going to handle it. So that is the show for today, everybody. It's been a wonderful show. I had a lot of fun, a lot of great poems. I loved all the rhyming too, and all the form. Now next week's prompt is going to be, let me put this on the screen. Next week's prompt will be right here. Write a poem in which the speaker is aboard a moving train. Write a poem in which a speaker is aboard a moving train. That is your prompt for next week. And you have 2 extra days to do it, actually, too, because as like I said before, next week's guest is Allison Luderman on Rattlecast number 100. But because next Sunday is Independence Day, we're pushing it back to the Tuesday time that we used to do. Tuesday, July 6th, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. I think we'll be able to catch more people live that time. That's the only reason I'm doing it that way. And like I said, I will put the schedule of times on rattle.com/rattlecast. Just to make sure that everybody knows when the broadcasts are going to be, because throughout the summer they're going to be all over the place, but mostly Sunday nights at this time, 8 p.m. Eastern. But next week for Rattlecast, we'll celebrate episode 100 with Allison Luderman, just one of the most consistently great, prolific poets. I mean, she sends poems all the time. We've published her a whole bunch of times. In the Time of Great Fires is the next poem, and book of poems, and I haven't read it yet because I like to read them right before the show, the day before. But I'm wondering if that's timely, unfortunately, too, with all the fires that are be propping up around here. But we will see what that title means next week on Rattlecast number 100 with Allison Luderman. I will see you then. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Talk to you soon. Good night.